Is embarking onto a career path as an independent pharmacist a good career decision? Is it worth the time and effort and energy? Hello and welcome. My name is Alex. I am your guide and coach of all things pharmacy careers. Here on our channel, we talk about anything pharmacy related. And in today's video, we'll be diving into the world of independent pharmacy. If it's your first time here, welcome. And if you like this kind of content, hit that subscribe button like you're hitting an angry, never mind, just hit it. Note that we're not talking about owning an independent pharmacy. We'll touch on that a little bit, but we're not diving into that as a career path. So without further ado, let's jump into this world of independent pharmacy as a career choice. Being an independent pharmacist is just like almost any other community pharmacy setting, with quite a few tweaks and nuances that we'll jump into. But of course, they dispense medications, educate patients, handle insurance problems, deal with other questions from healthcare providers, or provide recommendations for different medicines to patients and providers. You may not know this, but there are around 20,000 independent pharmacies in the United States, with about double that amount for chain type pharmacies. The first section I like to talk about is the salary. How much money are we talking about here? Okay, how much? Well, according to our Happy PharmD salary guide, which we publish and update every year, you'll find that the averages range from our sources from 126 to 138. If you look for retail pharmacists on most salary reporting websites, you're not going to find specifically independent pharmacy data, but you'll see here, according to salary.com, that the retail pharmacist earns around 162. I think salary.com overinflates this. I think this is honestly quite high. Where you can expect to be paid more, obviously, is in larger cities where the cost of living is much higher, while PayScale reports an average retail pharmacist salary of 103, which I think is very, very low. One thing to note about independence is that there potentially could be some real opportunity for you to increase your salary. If you work with a small chain and you know the owner and they trust you, it's certainly possible to start up a new service, a new form of revenue for the company, and perhaps profit sharing could be a part of that. A few pharmacists have told us about opportunities like this. I'd recommend you check out my interview with Eric Moody, one of our Happy PharmD coaches, who talks about how he went into independence and he is starting up services and getting paid very well to do so. Quick side note, how much do owners make? Well, according to a lovely article written by Benjamin Jolly, based on old data from 2011, said that if the average is getting paid around 124 plus 34,000 in profit, you're looking around 158, and that's based upon very old data. Owners are making probably, I'd say, a little bit more than that, but of course it does depend on the store, how profitable it is, any losses, and the diversification of their revenue streams. Historically, independents are paid much less than their retail chain counterparts, the Walmarts, the CVSs, the Walgreens of the world. People on Reddit often talk about how they're not providing benefits in some circumstances. And so because of these reasons, I'll give salary a score of 6 out of 10. The next section is satisfaction, and I think because the salary is less, you can expect that job satisfaction can be higher, but it is so store owner dependent. Sometimes I talk with people who work in these settings and the owners are micromanagers. They create a toxic work environment. It's not healthy. And others report how lovely the owner is and how freeing it is, and they're able to explore different services that they can create within the store. This is a super subjective thing, but I think one thing you can take home to the bank is to say that, you know what, I'm going to get paid less in the independent space, but for what I'm getting paid less, I'm gonna make up in job satisfaction. And if that's not the case, then go find another place, go find another owner. Because for every difficult pharmacy owner or manager, I think there is equal number of good ones. According to the National Pharmacist Workforce Survey, they found that independents have a much higher satisfaction score than other community pharmacy settings, a rating of 2.94 on a 1 to 4 scale. Their job stress was also lower than other community settings at a 2.93 on a scale of 1 to 4. Still stressful, but not rated as highly as the other setting. As one Redditor said when comparing independents to retail chains, the independents pay way less than the big three, but also way less stress. Another Redditor shared that they switched to independent pharmacy from the 3-letter. I think we can guess who that is. Roughly 4 years ago. Best decision I ever made for my mental health. I think one question to ask yourself when considering different avenues of careers is to really ask yourself, what is the cost of your mental health? I talk about in my sign-on bonus video, which you can click for here, about the cost of taking a job and the stress. And I kind of concluded on my own that there's no amount of money that I could be paid to take a job in one of these stressful situations, because I value my mental health, well-being, and happiness so much more than the money I would get from it. In terms of intention to leave, pharmacists reported on the workforce survey a 2.27 on a scale of 1 to 5. That's much, much lower than the other retail settings, where compared to large change, a 3.2. In the diversity, equity, and inclusion section of this report, I think it was interesting here that 66% of these pharmacists agreed that their employer valued their background and identity, compared to 32% at large chains. If you look at some of the reviews on Glassdoor, you're going to see higher ratings, I think, than most of the larger chains. Hometown Pharmacy was a 3.8. Good Day Pharmacy was a 4.0. But as you can see here in the Dakota, it was a 1.9. So of course it varies. And the other thing to take note too is that there's not as many reviews of these places because they're just not as big when compared to the Walgreens, the CVS's, the Walmarts of the world. So because of these reasons, the higher stress, yet compared to the others, it's still, not as bad. I'm gonna give the satisfaction portion here a 5 out of 10. Given that across the board, you just almost can't really predict, depending on where you go, how satisfied you think you'll be. It's dependent upon the organization and the owner. Now I want to talk about the demand. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports currently that there's about a 3% growth overall for pharmacy. This changed just a few years ago where the growth was negative. I don't know really how much I trust the BLS's scores as how much they change, and they don't really document all of the things that cause these changes. So I don't know. One of the things that I am concerned about for demand and independence is recessions, as the number of new pharmacy stores has decreased in more recent years. But interestingly, according to one report by NCPA, found that 32% of the surveyed independent owners were considering closing their business this year. Now, that doesn't mean that they're actually going to do it. It's just they're thinking about it. A third. Remember, there are 20,000 independent pharmacies in the United States. In this report, they surveyed around 800 owners. I think that's enough data to kind of extrapolate to say, yeah, 20, 30% maybe are considering closing their doors. But I think that this trend is actually quite common. If you look at data from like 20 years ago, they were thinking that back then. With a looming recession that the United States keeps seeming to avoid, I think it's worth noting that whenever recessions happen, more stores close. And when you think about some of the larger chains, I think that you should expect that the volatility or the job security of these places will be a little bit riskier. But you know what? CVS, Walgreens just announced a ton of store closures. So I don't know, who's really 100% safe in any kind of career? I don't know of any. Now, we know that job roles are expanding in a variety of different pharmacy careers, and independence is no stranger to innovation. But one thing I am concerned about with independence is that according to this report from NCPA, nearly half of consumers rated technology and modern communications as the top requirement for retaining their business. But then only 53% of pharmacy owners use technology to compete for patients. So basically, consumers are saying, we want convenience, and if you don't give us that, then we're probably going to go seek it somewhere else from another provider. And then the owners, the decision makers at these places, say only half of them are like, yeah, we're going to use technology to keep these to stay competitive, right? That's a concern. Convenience is the way of the future. As this chart shows, convenience is what is going to retain consumers' business. 63% said that, while pharmacy, only 33% said, yeah, we're going to focus on convenience. I know I briefly mentioned it, that the number of new stores popping up has decreased. January 2023 to 2024 January, the number of independent pharmacies only increased by 31 stores compared to the number of new chains of 1,000 stores. That's a growth of 0.1% for independents to 2.7% for chain. Whereas if you look at from 2014 to 2024, the overall growth has been about around 1,200 new stores, or a growth of 5.8%. The industry and the demand for these jobs is in flux. As you can check out here in this list, that the number of new stores overall has decreased because of these major chain pharmacies closing stores in this graph here, from 39,000 just in 2018 to 36,000 in 2024. Meanwhile, seems kind of like that the independents are meeting that demand. They're reaching out in these places where these major chains are closing. If you just do a quick job search on ZipRecruiter for independent pharmacy, the job data here isn't great, as when you look at a job website and you type in independent pharmacy, you're not going to see a whole lot of jobs. When I did a search here, there was only 591 jobs compared to the typical community pharmacist number of jobs of 42,000. So with the expanding roles, the flux of the market, the looming recession, I'm going to give the job demand here for independent pharmacies a 6 out of 10. The next and final rating is the flexibility score. I like to think of flexibility as like the magic, the thing that you can't really describe or put into words very well with data, but how do people like this kind of role? Does it lead to new and interesting opportunities? I think that independents offer pharmacists a unique and potentially creative role that is owner specific. So if you're considering going down this career path, get to know the owner, find out the new and interesting things that they're doing. How are you staying competitive to the chains? What are you providing that they're not? Where do you see growth opportunities? You can learn all sorts of things in the interview process and find out, is this a place that you would like to grow, to learn, and to apply? Often independents have less store hours, and so that demands not as crazy of a work schedule for people. And I tend to like the independent work schedule versus something like of a retail chain. You'll find less, 12 work hour shifts at these places than say larger chains. There's also the ability to actually influence the work setting. If you're going to join a larger chain, a grocery store, or any other kind of community pharmacy setting, the amount of influence or pressure that you can put on the work system is infinitely a factor, a logarithmic factor. Okay, we're talking about a huge amount of difference of what you can control in these settings versus something like Walmart, where you're talking a multi-billion-dollar business. And when you're working at a small independent chain, like, you could influence that store significantly more. You can influence policies, procedures. You can create SOPs sometimes. You can talk to the manager or your director or the owner even and say, make your statement claim what you think the place can be done. Now, your ideas might not always be accepted because you don't always have the big picture like they do, but you can help influence the direction of the business. And for some people, the ability to just change the work environment is so valuable. The other thing that I like about independence is that it can help and train you to go into business for yourself. You can learn so much behind the business of pharmacy, get your feet wet, and see if you would like it. Because you could go out and start your own store. It is possible. I know that independent ownership is like not pushed at all in academia, but I believe it should. We need innovators in our industry. We need people pushing the envelope of what pharmacists can do. And because that's not happening at the major chains. It's not happening in grocery stores. It's not happening in mass merchandisers. But it can happen that much easier in these small independent settings. For these reasons, I'm going to give the flexibility score a 7 out of 10. And now for the final rating. You know, independents, I think, offer a lot more flexibility. They offer a lot more influence over the work setting. They offer a lot more satisfaction than many other types of community pharmacy settings. But on the flip side, they don't always provide the greatest pay by comparison. Sometimes they can be toxic work environments, but that's usually based on the manager or the owner. I mean, but the same is true for just about any job. And if you're just looking at numbers, the demand for these kinds of jobs isn't as prevalent. And there's not always an easy career trajectory growing into something bigger in these settings when compared to the other community practices. So for these reasons, I'm gonna give the independent pharmacy career path a 6 out of 10. You know, when I think about these career paths, I tend to focus more on the job satisfaction part, like what makes people happy. And if I were a betting man, which I don't know, I invest in Bitcoin, so maybe I am. I would put my money on pharmacists being unequivocally more satisfied and happy in independent pharmacy settings versus larger chains, mass merchandisers, and even some of the smaller chains of pharmacy. They have more influence over their work setting, they have autonomy, they have flexibility, but it is under threat. The market can do what the market does. These jobs are often not as secure as other places. They don't always provide benefits, but it is so subjective. So if you are considering this career path, do your due diligence, know what your options are, know what your value is, and be willing to negotiate for all your worth. So what did you think of my score and rating? Was I too harsh on independence? Was I too soft? If you are an independent pharmacist, what do you think about my score, and what would you tell someone who's considering going into an independent? You know, I think that this is potentially a great career path for people. I see a lot of happy independent pharmacists in the world, but I also hear of some horror stories as well. You got to take the good with the bad, and there is no perfect career. But if you are considering a career change, we would love to talk to you. As career coaches here at the Happy PharmD, we love helping people find fulfilling work and create the career plan to follow and get into those paths. So if you ever considered working with a career coach, hey, we're your guys and gals. We would love to help you. You can do that by scheduling a career advisor call with someone on our team. We'll put a link below for checking that out. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe if you like this kind of content. Let us know how we rated things here and give me feedback on this system, as I'm constantly trying to improve how we make these videos. Thanks for watching, and until we see you in the next one, take care.